Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Talking Shit About. I'm Elizabeth, and each month I bring on a guest to talk about something they love, something they hate, and hopefully by the end we've all learned something. Sometimes I bring on people with lived experience to talk about things like mental illness or grief, and in this case I brought Brie on. She's been on another episode, which is episode 15, about grief. And today we're going to talk about CPTSD, which is complex post traumatic stress disorder. Let's go ahead and talk some shit.
I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I have friends that are firefighters and I know that they use soap.
And she was screaming at me over soup.
Fuck this, I am not ever talking to a Scientologist again. These people are all insane.
I'm putting my bricks in the dumpsters, motherfuckers. Do you see me, bitches? I'm throwing my bricks. And he's just like chucking bricks.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Shit About. Those are my dogs in the background. I'll be muted, don't worry. I'm here today with Brie, and we're going to talk about CPTSD, which I'll probably struggle with the acronym, but that's what we're here to talk about. Brie, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So before we get started, do you want to talk a little bit about who you are as a person?
Sure, yeah. I go by she, her. I'm a musician and a writer. I also work on a farm for money. And I have CPTSD. I take meds for it and do therapy. Yeah, but I'm excited to maybe educate some people on what CPTSD is.
Awesome. I'm sure a lot of people, if not everyone, is familiar with PTSD, but what exactly is CPTSD?
So there are a couple of differences. Like PTSD can result from a single trauma or more than one trauma. And the symptoms of PTSD are like flashbacks, hypervigilance, sleep problems, isolating, difficulty concentrating, difficulty enjoying activities, difficulty remembering traumatic events, feelings of fear, guilt, and shame, and negative beliefs about yourself or others. And I know that's a lot to take in, but the difference between PTSD and CPTSD, that is the biggest difference, is CPTSD comes from repeated or prolonged trauma. So it's not necessarily a series of singular events. It's more like trauma that, I already said this, is repeated or prolonged. So you experience traumas on top of each other and you don't really have any space to process them separately. So they become compounded. And in addition to the symptoms of PTSD, CPTSD presents with feelings of worthlessness, shame, and guilt, difficulty regulating your emotions, difficulty connecting with others, physical symptoms like stomach ache, shortness of breath, dizziness, headache, and also suicidal feelings. And I'm not exactly sure how long CPTSD has been a diagnosis, but I know that it's a new diagnosis since I was diagnosed with PTSD. I feel like the diagnosis for me personally of CPTSD is definitely more fitting than just PTSD. Like, I don't necessarily want to get into traumatic events or anything, but I can just say that I was repeatedly traumatized a lot in my youth. And as a result, I developed CPTSD and it was misdiagnosed as asthma because I presented with like panic attacks and not being able to breathe.
Sorry, my dog has the zoomies right now. So when did you start to notice the symptoms, or I guess what was the point where you're like, okay, this is a problem for me?
I wasn't really in charge of my medical and mental health care until I was like 19 and I was off my parents' insurance. And at that point, I got a new doctor and I was talking to him about my symptoms and that I didn't really think I had asthma. And he was like, "Are you having panic attacks?" And I was, again, like 19 at the time, and nobody had ever been like, "Are you having panic attacks?" And I was like, whoa, I think I might be having panic attacks. So I started taking an SSRI and started taking Klonopin PRN for when I was having a panic attack. And like immediately the medication helped because almost all of the asthma medication I was taking had like a stimulant effect. So it made all of my panic attacks worse because like my heart started beating faster and I had a tendency to like hyperventilate. And I had been experiencing these symptoms since like the age of like 5 or 6. And so when I finally got to be in control of my own medical realm, medical health, I guess, that was when it was like, okay, I think that you have a mental illness and it's time for you to get a diagnosis.
Symptoms starting so young, that's tough because, like, how do you know that's not just how people are, you know?
Yeah, I knew that like my grandmother who passed away when I was little had asthma. So I was like really in fear for my life all the time. I was like, I'm gonna die. Just because like I thought my lungs were messed up. And I think that added to my anxiety as well.
So I'm hearing you faced a lot of anxiety. Were there any other symptoms that were bothering you particularly?
I have been an insomniac since I was a little kid. And like now with my meds, everything is a lot better. I get a lot more sleep than I used to. But my father worked at the White Pine and Sash Mill, and he would get off in the middle of the night, and like I would still be up at like 3 in the morning. And I had a lot of difficulty getting up for school. I had a lot of stomach aches, which are probably because I was a celiac, but like we didn't know about that in the 80s. But like now I know when I'm getting a stomach ache from like being upset. And I had a lot of trouble regulating my emotions, especially if they were anything surrounding like anger. Um, I had a tendency to just fly off the handle if somebody like made me angry in a triggered way. And now I understand what was going on, but like when I was little, I had absolutely no understanding of what was going on and like very little agency. So I ended up getting kind of treated as a problem child because I had really, really low emotional regulation. Like if an adult made me really upset, I would totally just like punch him in the wiener. And I thought that like I was defending myself. So
Yeah, no, when you have trauma brain, like something that can seem totally mundane or not a problem to somebody literally feels like life or death.
yeah, and I felt like that a lot. And I had really super intense nightmares that were centered around like my traumas. And like I would talk to my parents about it, and they would just be like, you need to not eat before you go to bed, or like no dairy before bed for like 3 hours, stuff like that. And for most of my growing up, I thought that that was just like how people lived. Like people don't sleep very much. They have really horrible nightmares. They wake up like freaking out because of the nightmare they had. They can't like just stop being mad. They're mad all the time. And yeah, it was really tough until I finally got like somebody who was like, let's figure out what's going on for real. And I had a therapist who I started seeing at the age of 12. And he was like, you're not bipolar. you're not this, you're not this, you're not this. I think you have PTSD. And I was just like, I don't really understand what that is. And I didn't like fully trust him because I didn't like trust very many people at all. I had a lot of problems like connecting with people on a really like true basis. Yeah. And then, like after I got meds, it was a question of finding like the right meds that would kind of help me give myself the space to heal. And I continued seeing my counselor from my childhood until like 2021. And then I got a new counselor and started doing EMDR, which is like you move your eyes and watch little lights while you like process traumatic memories. And it's really helpful. It's so amazing how much it has helped me to be able to regulate my emotions when I'm upset and not have as many like night terrors, not have as many triggers. Yeah.
That's awesome. I've heard really good things about EMDR. I tried it once, but it was like virtual. And I was like in such a headspace that I was like, I can't do this right. Fuck this, blah, blah, blah. So I should probably try again, but I'm really glad it's working for you. So we talked a little bit about medications, and you mentioned SSRIs and PRNs. What are those?
So an SSRI is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and it just like basically makes the serotonin stay in your brain and have a little party for a little bit longer, so your brain feels more happy or safe or like positive. And PRN is like take as needed. So like I had Klonopin, which is in the Xanax like Valium family, and it's an antipsychotic. And I would take it when I had a panic attack or when I was like super freaking out and pissed, and it would like knock me out. And so I had that as needed. Like I could take up to two a day with my prescription. Um, and I did end up like going up in dosage for a while just because I was having so many like trigger events. But like SSRIs weren't necessarily the answer for me. I tried a couple different like SSRI cocktail kind of things and ended up going off meds completely from like 2013 until 2016. And that was kind of a weird time for me. But it did lead me down a path where I found meds that worked for me. And they work really well. And I'm super glad that I can take them because I I can do a lot of stuff now that I couldn't before. Like even if it's just having like a simple conversation with somebody I just met, you know. I'm not constantly looking for danger in my surroundings.
Good. And then before we recorded, when you first reached out to me, you mentioned something about thorazine. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so thorazine or chlorpromazine is it's generic. It's an antipsychotic that is one of the first like big antipsychotics that was produced in America. Uh, its brand name Thorazine is like because it'll knock you out. And like in the 50s and 60s when people were like in asylums, a lot of times you see them being injected with something like in movies or shows. And generally what that would be thorazine, and it's used in very large amounts to completely knock people out. It has a hugely sedative quality, and it isn't used as often today because one of the side effects of it is a thing called tardive dyskinesia, where you have uncontrollable muscle movements. And initially, that was a kind of a barrier for me wanting to take it. So I was like, what if I, can't stop moving my mouth and smacking my lips? Because that's something that is fairly common as a like TD side effect. Like I don't take enough to knock me out. I take 100 milligrams once a day. I was taking 200 milligrams, so like 100 twice a day for a while. And I have been able to titrate off like the daytime dose with a couple med changes. So it's a really effective drug. It just has a weird side effect that isn't like 100% of people get them. The TD, it's been used for a long time. It's kind of weird and funny to me that I'm taking something that, like, say, Sylvia Plath would have been prescribed, like, yeah.
So it sounds like the Thorazine, you were definitely reluctant. How do you feel about like taking medications? I know, like me personally, I always feel conflicted where it's like I want the least amount of medication, but I also want my symptoms in check. So how do you balance that in your mind?
I just just knowing the difference that the meds have made in my whole, like, the way I act and the way I think about myself, and how like scared of so many things I was. I'm so full of rage. I am pro medication. And like I don't want to take a ton of medication. I'm allergic to a bunch of medications, so like I deal with a lot of stuff using like naturopathy. Um but like I haven't been able to find like an herb or a magic potion from nature that works as well as this combination of medication. And like I was anti-meds for a long time, but I think it was because I was given the wrong meds and they weren't like helping me as much as I needed them to. So I feel strongly that people with CPTSD can benefit from taking medication as long as they have a good team behind them, and um, are willing to maybe try a couple things to see what works best.
So we might be like a little bit repetitive in these next few questions, but was there anything that was particularly unhelpful in your journey, whether it was like a particular thing that a professional or a friend said or a medication or anything like that, but just something that you tried that you decided wasn't for you?
Um, so I tried to do like kind of a group thing about PTSD for a while. There was a group, there probably still is a group that does PTSD support, like group kind of therapy stuff. And I was kind of laughed at in this way or treated differently because I wasn't a veteran. Because for a long time, PTSD, previously known as shell shock, was only associated with soldiers who had been to war. And it was really hard for me to talk about my my life and my problems because they didn't see me as somebody who authentically had the same problem as them. And I I did not find that helpful at all. I don't know. It was bad, and I tend to avoid group therapy because of that experience. And there was also like a bunch of resistance by my family, like, you don't have anything wrong with you. You're just flawed. Like you just can't control your emotions. That's what your problem is. Like you're acting like a spoiled brat. be like, I just want to be heard on this one issue right now that I'm freaking out about. So it was weird. I had to kind of find my place that like I could be authentic and seen as authentic, um, and be able to like touch base with other people about like how they felt and how I felt, and like being able to do that without feeling guilty was pretty big, or like ashamed. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. So, medication, it sounds like, is one of the things that's been helpful. So, things that are helpful, people who have supported you, that kind of stuff. I'd love to hear about it.
I have a really supportive partner. She also has mental illness, and our mental illnesses fit really well together because we kind of are like opposite ends of the mental illness spectrum. And that has been a huge, huge, huge motivator, the relationship, because we started our relationship on the grounds of having like really good communication and being able to talk about like our feelings and our hopes and our dreams and what's going on. And that support has been amazing. My mom eventually realized that I did have a mental illness. And the more she was able to accept that, the more I was able to have a real relationship with her. And in doing so, like that kind of helped with some of the trauma events that I experienced. Talk therapy has been hugely helpful, especially with my new counselor, because she she really gets me to question like why I'm judging myself, or like why I feel ashamed or why I feel guilty. And when I start like questioning those responses that I'm having, I can kind of unravel it and be like, what's going on at the core of this interaction? Or what's going on at the core of this feeling? And kind of sussing it out like that is, it's really helpful, but it's also like a confidence builder. You know, it's like, okay, I can figure out what's going on, I can articulate it, I can like check in with my inner child kind of and be like, what's going on with chicken pot pie? What needs are not being met? Like, what do I need? And yeah, I have a really great therapist. And the EMDR has been great too, because it's been reducing like the severity of my triggers and the amount of my triggers. And like when I was younger and presented with that as an option, I was just kind of like, this bullshit. I'm not going to look back and forth. I'm not going to like tap my earlobes. You're crazy. So kind of letting go of that and being like, I'll try this has been really great. And I have a couple of things on my plate that help me feel like a good person. Like I teach ukulele to third graders at a rural school and teach guitar to eighth graders at the same rural school. And that makes me feel like I'm a productive member of society. Like I'm doing something really good that nobody else is doing. And the more positive experiences I have, I think it starts to balance out like the amount of negative experiences I've had. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but you know, like creating good things in my life, or you know, they 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 help me feel better about myself, which helps me like be able to be more objective and clinical, I think, when I'm dealing with like my mental illness as an entity kind of rather than like an identity.
Yeah, you're so spot on. I've heard that it takes 10 positive interactions to counteract a negative interaction you have with somebody. So I could totally see that being similar to, life experiences where, you go out and something traumatic happens to you. And so it might take you a few times. Again, I'm not a professional, but you know, I think that's kind of the idea of exposure therapy is, you know, slowly getting yourself used to that. The more positive experiences you have, the less dangerous it feels. So I think you're pretty spot on there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of glimmer moments?
I have not. What are glimmer moments?
So they are moments, they just kind of happen to you. For me, it's usually when I'm out on the porch with my dogs in the sunshine, but it's like a moment of I'm glad I'm where I'm at and the world's a beautiful place. And I'm sure some people feel like this all the time and good for them. But have you have you experienced any of those moments, especially since you know, starting your journey for mental health?
Yeah, I've never heard them called that. I really like that glimmer moments. My family, my extended family had a cabin for a long time, and when I would go there, I would feel like this is what it's all about, you know? Like this is how people should feel all the time. And it was like always a safe space. And I think that helped make it possible for me to feel so good there. Like everything was right with the earth. And also I play in a band, and when I'm on stage, I feel like I can do anything. Or, you know, when I'm performing, not on stage necessarily, because sometimes we just play like out in a field. But like that, I think probably has brought me the most like glimmer moments of feeling just like good, and like how I like maybe quote unquote should feel, you know?
Yeah. Did you ever picture yourself having those moments back when you were like 18, 19?
No, not at all. I was just like, everything sucks. I suck. I'm a trash person. Nobody likes me. And the only reason people hang out with me is because I sell pot. That was like pretty much my mindset. And I was like afraid to do some things because I was afraid I would just like unlock this unceasing channel of rage and, you know, maybe hurt somebody, whether it was like emotionally or physically. So, yeah, I'm glad you pointed them out as glimmer moments. I really like that.
Yeah, I saw that online somewhere and I love it. I use it, I do this focus group and I like to pull that one out all the time. Yeah, well, I'm super proud of you and all the work that you've done, and you are an amazing person to hang out with. And that's one of the reasons why I love doing these interviews is because, especially with people I know, because I think I know somebody and then I learn so much about them and the way they think, and I would have never guessed, you know, that you've dealt with like anger and things like that just because like, oh, Bree, she's so chill. Like I don't know. So I really appreciate you being open and sharing everything.
It's always good to visit with you, Liz. You're an amazing person too, and I appreciate you a lot.
Thanks. I would like to know if you have any advice for someone. I'm thinking back to where you were when you were, you know, 19 or so. Any advice for somebody that's struggling with those symptoms that we talked about?
I would say the most you can, keep trying. Like keep trying to connect with other people. Keep trying counseling. If, you know, if it's not working for you, maybe you need a different counselor. Just keep trying. The meds aren't working right, maybe you need different meds. Keep trying, you know, like if you just quit and decide to just deal with it on your own, like you're probably not going to have a very happy life. And I like that makes me really sad that there are people out there struggling with CPTSD who like aren't letting themselves be helped or aren't helping themselves if they're, you know, like unable to. Persistence is key because like one day you're finally gonna like reach a point where you have enough space to deal with your problems. Like I think of medication as something that gives me space to deal with things. And I wouldn't have that mindset unless like I had been so persistent and like you got to lobby for yourself. You have to be able to tell your doctor when things aren't working, and like sometimes that's met with resistance, and you have to really like advocate for yourself and keep doing those things. And if something feels work, you don't have to do that thing. It's okay.
Thank you, Bria. It's beautiful. Were there any closing thoughts that you have? Anything else you wanted to throw out there?
I think that it's important to not just discuss your mental health with people who have the same problem as you. I think it's good to have like multiple flavors in the mental health M&M pack. Like, have a friend who's bipolar. It might help you discover things like strengths in yourself that you didn't know you had. Have a friend who has Tourette's. Maybe you'll be able to like be somebody who they can relate to, like you don't really know how much of an impact you can make on somebody's like mental health work until you kind of cultivate these sorts of relationships. And it kind of ties back in with how like important my partner in my relationship is to me. And we both have mental health problems, but we kind of balance them out in a way, or we can sense when something is going horribly wrong and be like, hey, I think maybe you need to take a Klonopin, or like, hey, I think maybe you're too hot right now and you need to cool down, like physically. So that's I think that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Brie. That was wonderful. You're such a good guest. Thank you so much for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
Hey dude, anytime. It's super fun to do this, and like I want more people to know about mental health and help for it, and to like understand what things are. So, if they have a person in their life who has CPTSD, they could be like, oh, this is maybe what's going on, or, whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's so good to be on your interview.
Great. And if anybody wants more Brie, they can check out episode 15 where you came on to talk about grief. And maybe someday we'll do a fun topic. Not that I don't like talking about this kind of stuff, but maybe we'll mix it up. But again, thank you, Brie. I really appreciate you being so open and sharing your story again.
You're totally welcome, Liz. Anytime.
That's a wrap for this month's episode of Talking Shit About. We'll be back next month, the first Friday of the month. And if you want to come on the show or suggest a topic or give feedback, you can email killizabeth.pod@gmail.com. That's KILLIZABETH.POD@gmail.com. And if you're interested in hearing some of Breed's music, you can check out New World Future on Bandcamp and Spotify, and I'll have links to all that jazz in the comments. Thank you for listening and stay safe.